Do you know when to tell yourself that you need to go to bed? Remember when you were little and you didn't really know when you were overtired? You just got cranky or cried when something trivial happened. Or maybe you did the opposite and got hyper and did stupid things. Or you suddenly hated everything and started throwing punches. But your parent or caregiver somehow knew when you were tired and put you to bed as soon as possible. As adults, we may find that somehow we've lost the ability to give ourselves the same kind of care. It's past 6 p.m. and we're still at work. We woke up at 5 a.m. that morning having a rough night's sleep because we woke up multiple times throughout the night with various levels of anxiety over things we ultimately can't control. We've had multiple caffeinated beverages throughout the day or sugar hits, which we know is really not a long-term strategy, but we just need to do it today just to get through this one day, which turns into just to get through this 1 year. We've either read or dealt with about 238 emails by 4 p.m, most of which have been pretty unnecessary, or we've been CC'd in for good measure. By the end of the day, you've already been exposed to at least 10,000 ads. That is the average number of commercials a person is exposed to right now. You've had to continuously stay calm and usually with a smile on your face in a sea of absolute human stupidity, fielded requests for help or attention from friends, colleagues, or family, saw multiple news reports that either saddened or depressed you, and now, surprise, what has descended upon us is the danger zone of depletion, often without our awareness. A zone in which we often label people as stupid and not their behavior. We somehow don't have the patience that we had at the beginning of the day. We often interpret the worst about somebody when it was probably an accident. And we need to make quick conclusions and assumptions about people because we just don't have the ability to carry any more cognitive load. Worst of all, we may actually start treating those around us in an unkind way, or certainly not in a way that we know is coming from our better selves. Often because we're trying to alleviate some of the frustration or rage that we feel about having been in the world for the day. And we don't even realize that so much of our perception has been depleted. It's hard to describe because it's not like one big gigantic thing that exploded and happened which made you this way. It's usually death by 1,000 cuts that happen throughout the day. Recently, I was introduced to a man from a very different culture to Australia, and he was curious about what my experience has been working with lawyers and how they manage and handle stress in the workplace. I shared a couple of notable instances that I was witness to in my experience in firms, and this is across 3 states of Australia. It's across global firms, small national firms, it's all the same, which is quite common in the Australian workplace landscape. And I've realized it's also similar to the US, although I think the level of dysfunction in the workplace is worse in the US, certainly from my US colleagues who have been sharing information that they swear at staff members under stress in the US. In Australia, they swear, but usually not at people. And in Australia, I remember one instance when I was working in Melbourne that one partner had to be sent off for anger management training because he was in the habit of yelling and also throwing things at his legal assistant. So the second example, I also recall working in a government department where this female director literally stood over and screamed at a junior lawyer, berating her in front of everybody, including the whole department, and also another government department that was sharing the floor at the time. The whole floor went silent. It was a very awkward situation. When I shared these examples of cases, this director was absolutely shocked. He was stunned that this actually occurred. And I was equally surprised that he had never before heard of these kind of stories. This is where I made assumptions. It sort of made me laugh because after sharing those stories about what is common behavior in Australian workplaces, he wondered how come people were able to reach adulthood without having learned how to manage their anger and their emotions. It's been a question that has been rolling around in my mind ever since, and I have gone back, like this week, going back to the workplace. I'm now looking at things differently, and I started wondering, have I been so accustomed to witnessing this kind of behavior, this level of stress, that everything has to be done quickly and has to be done correctly and quality with 100% accuracy? It has created monsters of people in order to hit all of these targets. Has the environment created and attracted terrible behavior in order to get work done? I started questioning perhaps Western culture, and the huge focus on individualism means that we often see quite extreme ways that people take their stress out on other people. And to an extent, we can all be like this. It takes a lot of attention to our own behavior and how we process things and how we deal with our stress and our problems and our challenges and how do we overcome them and try not to spill the nuclear waste over everybody else who's around us. We often don't know how much of the day has actually slowly chipped away and depleted our perspective. We can become so worn down, always having to be alert, always on, and then we don't realize how much sometimes we just can't cope much anymore by the time the day is done. We've usually held back from saying things that need addressing because to start talking about them, it usually opens up a whole other can of problems which we just don't have the capacity to deal with. So we suppress a lot throughout the day. Let's not discuss this. Let's leave that to another day. Meanwhile, you're also fielding so many requests for help, attention, keeping a calm environment around you, trying to monitor yourself. We're just humans. We can easily slip into a fragile state. And our rubber band is just at full stretch, which is often when we can say, do, or think in ways that really do more harm than good. So hence my question, do you know when you need to tell yourself to go to bed? Because getting rest, sleeping, and going to bed earlier, even surprisingly earlier than you think you need it, can sometimes be the very thing that is needed in order to wake up the following morning and realize the world is not going to end, that day has passed, get a fresh start, and that things aren't so bad after all. Maybe we can show ourselves the same kind of love, care, and attention again that we received when we were little, and put ourselves to bed a little earlier than we think an adult should go to bed. For example, 9 o'clock, maybe 8:30. Maybe half an hour or an hour before you usually go to bed. It might sound quite early for an adult, but I invite you to try it out. I have, and I am still doing so, and my gosh, it is wonderful. And you may also find that things aren't so bad in the morning.